I'm Elliot Chodoff, and welcome to Conflict Uncovered, your go-to podcast for in-depth analysis on the complex and dynamic conflicts shaping the Middle East, Israel, and the world. Join us as we delve into the latest developments, historical contexts, and the geopolitical forces at play. We bring you the insights you need to understand the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay engaged, and uncover the truths behind the headlines. Hi and welcome. It's November 19th, early evening here in Israel, and I'm joined today by my very dear friend, David Patterson, Professor David Patterson. He's a distinguished professor in Holocaust studies at UT Dallas, and with over 40 books to his name, articles, lectures, someone who is eminently capable of joining us in this discussion on the subject of genocide. As a matter of fact, at least one of his books is specifically about genocide, and a number of them deal with the topic in one way or another. So, first of all, David, thanks for being with us.
Yes,
Great
thank
seeing you.
Good to be here. Good to see you.
Okay, with the accusations of genocide floating around from the criminal court through the rhetoric, the demonstrations, what I'd like to start with is to go back. The term isn't that old. It's less than 100 years old. And it came into being for a very specific purpose. So as one who believes in understanding things from the beginning in history, could you start by telling us where the term comes from, what it's based on, why it was coined, and so on?
Yes. Well, the term was coined by Raphael Lemkin, who was an attorney, Polish-born Jewish attorney. He coined the term between 1941 and 1943. And it was happening at a time when mass murder and genocide was taking place at the hands of the Nazis. In August 1941, Winston Churchill, in a radio broadcast, said that we are in the presence of a crime without a name. So Lemkin came up with a name for this crime. He defined it very briefly at first as the destruction of a nation or of an ethnic group, and adding that it could include destroying their culture, language, religion, economic existence, and so it got broader and broader. He wrote a book called Axis Rule in Occupied Europe, in which he discusses the term and uses the term. The book was published in 1944. So the term came into usage before the war was over, and in the at the very time that the Shoah, the Holocaust, the extermination of the Jews was taking place. So Lemkin was looking for a word. What do you call this? What do you call this exactly? So you see,
why was mass murder just not good enough as a term?
Well, mass murder is killing lots of people, but not killing a people, an entire people, or the attempt to kill an entire people. So you understand the difference. A people and lots of people are different.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's and the Holocaust has posed problems for what do you call it in many contexts, and Lemkin was a lawyer, so he coined the term as a legal term to describe, the crime without a name, as Churchill referred to it. So the term was, comes from Lemkin. The term has been used in many other contexts
Sure.
since
Uh,
that time.
I just want to go back a step. Why is there a need for a legal term? Once again, it would seem that if you're looking at it from a legal perspective, the addition of the term genocide to a charge of mass murder, I mean, mass murder should carry the maximum penalty affordable. Why not simply prosecute for murder, mass murder, and why shift it to terms like genocide and crimes against humanity?
Well, that's a good question. It's a legal term that applies to international law, which is already a little problematic. I mean, who legislates international law? Who enforces it? Everything that the Germans did under German law was legal. They violated no German laws, right? And which is part of their defense. Crimes against humanity was a new category of criminal action, right? What are you violating when you are committing a crime against humanity? What does that mean? I was in a discussion the other day about medical ethics and Nazis. The Nazis had a medical ethics code, and nothing they did, and with the experiments and the horrific experiments on humans was in violation of their code. So they were acting in an ethical manner. But the question is, in the name of what? How do you? What makes one ethical code better than another? What makes one set of laws better than another? So what is happening with the genocide and the Holocaust is not just the murder of human beings, but the very idea of a human being came under assault. And that's where something that transcends a given national legal code comes into play. Crime against humanity, the meaning of humanity, the sanctity of humanity. So it is an interesting term for legal scholars and legal thinking to bring this term genocide into use. It does enable us to accuse countries of committing a crime and not just individuals.
So genocide would have to be a policy, not just an action.
Yes, a policy sanctioned by a state or political entity in charge of a region.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's not just one group of individuals killing another group of individuals, like a gang war or something like that.
Okay. Is there an implicit or explicit quantification? Because usually in law, for a law to be applicable, come lay down in scale, theft and larceny and grand larceny, it's above a certain amount of value, below a certain amount of value, and that sort of quantification sets which law applies to a particular action. Is there, once again, explicit or implicit, some sense of scale that makes something a genocide, either in relative or in absolute terms?
Yes, it's the scale. You can have a genocidal policy regardless of scale. And this is where it becomes vague when you start talking about intention, right? The intended extermination of a people, a culture, a language, an economic existence, social institutions.
Unless you have a document like the Protocols of the Wannsee Conference.
That spells it out. Yeah.
Right. I mean, then you'll have a problem of intent.
You don't have to guess what the intention was
Right.
once when you have the document. Yeah, it's stated. So, that's a good example. When the Nazis convened the Wannsee Conference, Reinhard Heydrich, January 20th, 1942, they gathered together the heads of the various ministries of Nazi Germany, the head of the people who run the country, to discuss how they're going to go about the extermination of the Jews. They're already guilty of genocide just by convening the meeting and drafting and taking the notes. Adolf Eichmann took the notes.
Right.
So it's already a criminal action, as the term genocide is understood from Lemkin. So it's you don't have to hit a certain number for it to be genocide, as the term gets used by Lemkin.
You would have to at least show an intention against a significant proportion of a population, of a specific population.
Well,
so there too is a slippery.
It can get slippery, but you have to show an intention to wipe out enough of the population so that they're no longer a viable people. Language is one of the things that can be targeted in a genocide. There's no more Yiddish literature after the Holocaust.
Okay.
People still know Yiddish, but it's as a literature, it's gone. The Cambodian genocide perpetrated by Pol Pot to wipe out all political opposition, and he killed enough so that he had no more opposition. So it's killing enough to render the targeted group ineffective and no longer viable as a group with a group identity.
Okay.
You can see that it's still kind of vague. But in the case of the extermination of the Jews, the intent was clear, and the methods were clear. The efficiency of the killing operation was clear. So that's not such a ambiguous case there.
Right. Okay, so let's fast forward. We have later genocide conventions, definitions, the UN applied, and now the International Court's application. And of course, the South African accusation against Israel, which I imagine you've seen the most recent reports that Iran and Qatar poured a lot of money into South Africa afterwards to being behind it. But leaving that aside, how does an accusation like that against Israel in Gaza gain any sort of legal traction? Now, political traction, I understand. Israel's been accused of just about everything under the sun. The name calling is old and extensive. But for a court to rule that there is evidence of genocidal action on the level of prosecutable, how does that fit into a definition? It certainly doesn't seem to balance with a Holocaust.
No, no. The genocide is not, strictly speaking, a military action. You don't commit genocide as a military response to an attack on your soil, like October 7th, 2023, Israel's attack, Israel responds. That's the Nazis are not responding to an attack from the Jews. Pol Pot's not responding to an attack. The Rwandan case, there's not the wiping out the Tutsis is not a response to the Hutus being attacked.
The Armenian genocide.
The Armenian genocide was
Turks.
a jihad against the Christians, Armenian Christians, Assyrian Christians, and then Greek Christians. The Turks were not under attack from the Armenians or Assyrians or Greeks.
Okay.
The Christians. So when the Red Army killed tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of German soldiers, that was not a genocide. That's warfare. Genocide is distinct from warfare. So its structure, its intent, it's the intended extinction of significant enough people to render the people no longer a people. There are still Armenians, there are still Assyrians, but they're very loosely organized, and they're scattered. They're in a diaspora of their own. They're no longer the nation that they were before they were exterminated.
Okay. So how does this thing fly in a criminal court?
I don't see how it can fly in a criminal court, but whose court? The Nazi war crimes trials were carried out by military tribunals, military courts, or they were organized by a military apparatus. The Allies who won. The Allies who won the war had judges and investigators involved. You might consider the case of Eichmann, the Eichmann trial. Eichmann was tried by an Israeli court, right? A national court, not a military court or tribunal.
And right.
And he was charged with, the mass murder, you might say, genocide. I don't know. I'd have to check. Eichmann's indictment is many pages long.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if the term genocide is used in that indictment. Perhaps it doesn't matter. Eichmann is, guilty of something horrific, whatever you call it. But it requires some kind of international treaties, agreements, convention. It requires an enforcement apparatus of some kind. I think that the move on the part of South Africa against Israel, with the assistance, the necessary assistance of Iran, Qatar, money from Muslim Brotherhood. I have seen a report on that. In fact, I know the guy who wrote it.
I know you do.
So South Africa is up to its eyes in this collusion with jihadist entities whose stated aim is the extermination of Israel. So this move and bringing the charge of genocide against Israel is itself genocidal. If you look at what their ultimate aim is in this process, they're not just trying to bring Israel to justice because Israel did something unlawful, and even under international law. That's not their aim. We know that. It's part of demonizing Israel. Their aim is to demonize and ultimately dismantle the Jewish state. And of course, if the Jewish state is dismantled, the Jewish people will be murdered. The Jewish people will be murdered without Israel. They're targeted now.
Yes. Europe in particular is going through the European Jewish community, a very difficult time. You sort of preempted my next question, which is good, but let me articulate it and then continue this discussion. The question was going to be why. Why charge Israel with genocide when, from a purely, how can I put this, reasonable, logical point of view, if I were going to accuse Israel of something and make it stick and make it difficult for Israel to face in a factual way, I would charge Israel with excessive use of force, disproportionate casualties among non-combatants, unnecessary damage and destruction. All of those words are value laden. In other words, go prove what is necessary, what is excessive. There are no hard quantifications. And if I were trying to defend Israel against those kind of charges, I could do it, but it would take a great deal of work to show that Israel isn't doing any of the above. It would seem that it's very easy to dismiss a genocide charge against Israel just on the basis of the points that you've raised in this discussion. And the question is, why throw out an accusation that is so easily refuted by Israel to anyone who's willing to listen? Apparently, the court is not among those people who are willing to listen, but many other are. Why aim so high and go beyond the reality? And there's sort of a second part to this. Isn't this in many ways a form of Holocaust denial?
Yes, in many ways. And as to the why, it's they're going after Israel for genocide, not because they hope to successfully prosecute the crime. The intent here is to demonize. Demonization is always part of genocide. You demonize the ones you're about to exterminate. Demonize and dehumanize. So what is morally required when dealing with a genocidal state? It has to be eliminated or dismantled. It has to.
It's a moral thing to do.
So, yes. So it's about incitement to hatred and not successful prosecution. It's about legitimizing what is, in the end, itself a genocidal aim. Okay? And it's dehumanizing. And it's, once the Jews are dehumanized, they can no longer be victims. Once they're demonized, they can no longer be a victim any more than Satan can be a victim. right? So this is part of the anti-Semitic thinking, according to which it's not the premise is not that all Jews are evil, but all evil is Jewish. If Israel's doing it, it's genocide. If it's genocide, Israel's behind it. And it is, of course, a form of Holocaust denial. I mean, it's reversing the Jew and the Nazi. Now the Jews are the Nazis, right? It's de-victimizing, if I can use that word, the Jews that were exterminated in the Holocaust. We want the world to pity the Jews. Now look at what the Jews are doing themselves. You see, so it's not about legal prosecution. It's about demonization for the sake of elimination in the end.
So there's almost a perverse inversion of chronology that October 7th was justified because of what Israel is doing in Gaza.
Yes. No, that is correct. It's an inversion of chronology. Yeah. It's similar to, what's called Holocaust inversion. Now, Jews are now the Nazis, the Palestinians are the Jews.
Uh-huh.
And it's as these charges gain more traction, whether for the sake of legal prosecution or not, by gaining traction, I mean gaining sympathy on the part of the world that remained silent during the Holocaust. The world is, remaining silent in the face of these accusations. In other words, nobody is taking Iran to task for this when Iran is clearly behind it. There's all sorts of, hard evidence of that.
Sure. Interesting.
Yeah.
So once again, the world sits by and watches, perhaps shakes its head, and lets the trains go past.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a very powerful documentary called, I think it's called "Sing a Little Louder," and it's about it's a docudrama based on a true incident and Nazi Germany. There's a church not far from railroad tracks, and one Sunday they're in church singing, and then the train pulls up, and they, for whatever reason, it stops for a while. And very close to the church, and you can hear Jews on the train crying out for water. I'm thirsty. And the people in the church hear it, and you can see some of them are disturbed by it. And their leader, their pastor, saying, sing louder, so you can't hear it. They're in church, right? They're praying, singing hymns.
Oh.
Sing louder, right. So you don't have to hear the outcry of the Jews or anyone else. This what starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews. It's a cliche, but it is the case. Right.
Canary in the mine.
Yes. Yeah. And the canary is suffocating right now.
Yes. Okay. Well, thanks for this conversation. It was very enlightening.
Thank you.
We will certainly do this again on a variety of topics. Full disclosure, David and I have been having an ongoing conversation now for, about close to 30 years. So we have lots to talk about, and I will impose on him to join us many times again in the future. So once again, David Patterson, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And to all our listeners, stay engaged, stay safe. Thank you for listening to Conflict Uncovered. As always, it's been another rough day in the Middle East. We hope you found this episode insightful and engaging. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share and recommend with your friends, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. For more in-depth analysis and exclusive content, join our community and follow us on social media. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to explore the critical issues shaping the Middle East and the world. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.